Hello and welcome to the Wired Health EY Startup Showcase, which is part of Wired's flagship event, Wired Health. I'm Matt Reynolds, I'm the science editor at Wired, and today we have the really exciting opportunity to hear firsthand from 6 super fascinating startups across femtech, neural engineering, sustainability, and digital health. So here's how it's going to work. Each startup is going to present a 5-minute lightning presentation to our panel of 3 judges for the opportunity to win a keynote presentation slot at the Wired Health virtual conference, which will take place next week on March the 31st. And with that, of course, I'm delighted to welcome our 2 judges who, alongside myself, will determine the winning startup. First up, we have Hélène Baxter, who is an associate partner within EY's Health Sciences and Wellness practice. Hélène has spent the last 15 years in the life sciences and health sector, working with clients across pharma, biotech, and health. And our final judge, joining Hélène and myself, is Irina Haivas, who is a partner at European venture capital firm Atomico. Irina leads on investments in enterprise business and focuses on health tech and the intersection of biology and engineering. We're thrilled that you could both join us today, and we are super excited to start the discussion. So before we get started, I just want to run through a couple of very small housekeeping points. These startups will only be taking questions from the judges, I'm afraid, but the chat functionality is open, and we would love to hear what you're thinking of all the presentations. So please do get involved, chip in, ask your questions. And one other point, this briefing is being recorded, and we will gladly send you a copy of the link after the event ends. So just get in touch with one of our team if you want to see a recording of this event. Now, on to our first startup and our first pitch. Our first person pitching today is Danielle Rayleigh, who's the co-founder and CEO of Ancora.AI. Danielle co-founded Ancora with the mission to improve healthcare for all by accelerating innovation in medicine. Ancora is a Zurich-based technology startup that wants to revolutionize the clinical research industry. And their core product is a free AI-powered platform that connects patients and physicians to clinical research. And the company's mission is to improve healthcare for all by accelerating innovation in medicine. Danielle, welcome. It's great to have you with us here today.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Brilliant. Well, Danielle, it's over to you. No pressure starting up. Your 5 minutes start now.
Okay. So hi, everyone. I'm Danielle Rayleigh, the CEO, CTO, and co-founder of Ancora.AI, and I'm here today to talk to you about how we're accelerating innovation in medicine. So next slide, please. And you can go next slide. So to start, healthcare is pretty damn exciting. Recently, we've seen some incredible advances, such as cell therapy or CAR-T therapy in cancer, mRNA technologies for COVID and possibly other diseases, and CRISPR gene therapy, which we've yet to explore. And what do all these things have in common? They all need to go through clinical trials to be tested, approved, and available to people like you and me. So clinical trials literally stand between us and this exciting innovation. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, we're shit at it. We struggle to execute trials efficiently and effectively. And just to give you a few data points, 80% of clinical trials are delayed due to recruitment problems. Only 20% of patients even hear of trials as an option from their physician, and $4 billion a year is lost in trial inefficiencies. So to summarize, we have high costs, huge delays, and trials are only considered as a last resort. And let me bring this issue to life a little bit. There are huge obstacles in accessing trials from both physicians and patients, starting with reading through complex, lengthy trial information. And so trial participation today is like a lottery, and it's typically restricted to those privileged enough to be near a large research hospital. And so generally speaking, it takes a lot of effort to get a patient to a trial. And the difficulties and delays that we face with step 1, enrolling patients to a trial, come at a huge cost. And not only is this cost financial, but these delays mean we delay getting innovations in medicine out to the broader population. Next slide, please. And so what if we make tomorrow's medicine today's healthcare? So instead, patients and the public are aware and educated on trials, and all patients have access to trials, regardless of their location, socioeconomic status, or network. And what if the stakeholders could be seamlessly connected, meaning enrollment in a trial is effortless? trials can be proactively suggested to physicians and transitioned away from being considered as last resort to part of the treatment pathway. And this is our vision at Ancora AI. Next slide. And so we're the platform for the future of clinical trials. The platform is a hub where all trial stakeholders, so patients, providers, pharma, trial sites, come together in one central platform to make communication and coordination seamless. So it would be where patients and providers go to easily find trials, trial sites and pharma go subsequently to coordinate enrollment. And currently, trial coordination takes many point-to-point exchanges and is reinvented for each new trial. And this wieldy and convoluted process of information sharing and coordination is at the heart of the enrollment challenges and delays that we see today. So with Ancora AI as the hub, we can streamline those exchanges and make them more efficient, transparent, and straightforward. And we also use natural language processing, or NLP, as our engine to analyze thousands of trials to support providers and patients' trial requests at a scale not possible without technology, enabling patients to be matched and enrolled to the best trials for them throughout the patient journey. Next slide, please. And with this, Ancora AI enables quick and easy access to clinical trials to democratize, diversify, and accelerate enrollment. So this means more people can access this innovative medicine, including populations that are currently excluded. We can also move closer to achieving health equity and representation on trials, meaning we can finally investigate medicine that's safer and better for all. And with streamlining clinical trial participation, we can greatly reduce the timeline and cost of trials, and by doing so, reduce the cost of drug development and get new medicine to market faster, so more people can benefit from these incredible advances that we're investigating. And just a present-day example of what's possible with this acceleration is the COVID vaccine. So typically it takes about 7 years to complete trials up to phase 3 for a vaccine. And with the COVID pandemic, it took less than a year to run phase 3 trials and get international approvals. And impressively, we were able to do this for multiple vaccine candidates. Next slide. So if you think about how much we were able to accelerate vaccine development for COVID, imagine if we did that for other diseases and how much faster we could find cures. To make this happen, we need a streamline and scale trial participation, and responsibly built technology can be our greatest ally in this massive undertaking. So let's make tomorrow's medicine today's healthcare. Thanks so much for the attention. And if you'd like to see tomorrow's future clinical trial platform today, come check out www.ancora.ai.
Danielle, thank you so much for that fascinating presentation. Hélène, did you want to kick off with our first question?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Danielle. That was really interesting. So what resistance have you found so far in the community that you're targeting for this?
So I'd say for patients, there's no resistance. It's just a lack of awareness and education on trials. So there is a bit of work to bring that to the mainstream. And I think actually the pandemic has done a great help in actually bringing trials out there. And for hospitals, we have seen physicians are eager due to this, the time savings of being able to find trials. So that has been surprisingly better. The hardest part is untangling all of those point-to-point solutions to really say, what is that streamline? So what does that look like? And who is that email I need to work with, or that contact point at the hospital site to facilitate this? So there's been a little rumble, but I think we're all kind of eager for this future state.
Thank you. Irina, did you have a question?
Yeah, I wanted to understand a little bit better how you're differentiating against some of the other players, because there's been, throughout the past 5-7 years, a bunch of platforms trying to do similar things with different approaches. Some work better than others. Like why would you succeed when others didn't, and what maybe lessons learned from looking at other journeys here?
Yeah, thank you. So one of the biggest differentiators that we believe we have is certainly the technology that took us a few years to work out. And I think natural language processing has made some great strides in the past few years, which really helps to accelerate the efforts that we have. So I'd say 5 years ago, we didn't have the technology to be able to do some of the things we can do today. So that's a big differentiator. I also think our approach is different in terms of we're not just targeting one aspect of clinical trials, we understand and realize and acknowledge that it's an ecosystem that makes this work. And we really need those different integration points, and we can't be an extra effort outside of that. You almost need to be like a silent supporter within it. So I think that approach is different, as well as we're also approaching it in terms of starting with the best interests of patients. So how can we offer unbiased and really all options to patients? And what we've seen with competitors is for revenue or funding, that they'll offer or they'll do recruitment services for a specific trial or for a pharmaceutical company, which then of course introduces bias. And so we're believing, or our belief is that if we support patients first, that is the only way to really respectfully, truthfully approach this space.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Danielle, for a super interesting presentation and a really strong start to the day. Next up, we've got Oliver Armitage, who's the co-founder and chief scientific officer at BIOS, a company that is unlocking the potential of the nervous system in treating chronic disease by using AI-powered neural interfaces that can automatically read and write neural signals. So pretty heady stuff. This is co-founded by Cambridge University graduates Emil Hewage, a computational neuroscientist, and Oliver Armitage, who I mentioned, a biomechanical engineer. BIOS is made up of a wide range of experts from neuroscience, machine learning, software engineering, applied biomaterials, biotechnology, and medicine. So a pretty daunting lineup of people there. Oliver, welcome.
Thanks very much, Matt. Looking forward to talking about this a bit further.
Absolutely. Well, please go ahead, Oliver. Your 5-minute presentation starts now.
Hi, everyone. So as Matt covered, I'm Oliver. I'm the co-founder and chief scientific officer of BIOS. And at BIOS, we're using machine learning and neural interfaces for long-term chronic conditions. If we go to the next slide. So chronic diseases are the largest problem in healthcare. Everyone knows that they're the largest killers: cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, urinary incontinence. Like hundreds of the most common conditions are chronic diseases, and they're also 40 trillion spending between now and 2030, and about 86% per year of the annual healthcare spend. So they're sort of the major problem in healthcare due to their ongoing nature. And if we go to the next slide, everyone also knows that drug development is both slowing down, but it's also least effective in these long-term chronic conditions. Cardiovascular diseases are even less well served by new drug development than something like oncology. And if we go on, and at BIOS, we're using the nervous system to cure these chronic diseases. The nervous system is not just your brain and your spine, and it's not just what controls your movement. I think a big misunderstanding in biology is that organs function on their own. They don't. They're constantly being told what to do by the brain every second, thousands of times per second being told what to do. And if we can access this neural messaging and if we can stimulate in order to change it, then we can change how a specific organ is functioning and bring it out of a disease state and into a healthy state. If we move on. And so when we look at these neural signals, we see how they impact with all of the different physiology throughout the body. And the reason this is now possible, next slide, please, is that machine learning and AI means that we can now decode these signals in real time. If the genome and proteins are the sort of information storage, they're like the hardware of the body, then the nervous system is the internet. It's transmitting real-time information to every organ thousands of times a second. And neural interfaces are, the genomic sequencer of that world. And machine learning is what allows us to do the base pair decoding. It's what allows us to understand the neural language and manipulate it in order to cause a therapeutic effect. If we move on. So at BIOS, this is what we do. We use AI to read and write neural data. On the screen here, you can see an example of some of the data we've collected from one of our long-term trials. This is an example of a neural event called an orthostatic drop. It happens to everyone, every animal, every time they stand up or stand up from either a chair or laying down. The blood pressure in your head drops because of the change in elevation, and your nervous system reacts by detecting that blood pressure change and then causing your heart to beat faster within less than half a second in order to counteract the drop in blood pressure. And that nervous system reflex, called the baroreflex, when it goes wrong, you have postural hypertension, which is one of the chronic diseases. And we can see and record these nervous system signals transmitting this information in real time. If we go to the next slide. Here you can see an example of our neural biomarker for hypertension in the bottom right, that graph, and you can read more about this on the white paper on our website. but that graph is effectively a biomarker of that sensation of blood pressure change. And as we can detect that in real time, it allows us to manipulate it and start to treat those therapeutic loops. Next slide. So at BIOS, we're using this technology in a number of different indication areas with pharmaceutical and device partners to discover the mechanism of action, the neural mechanism of action of chronic diseases, how they develop, and of drugs and therapeutics to treat them. We're also now moving into doing this in designing neural therapeutics. So direct stimulations, electrical changes to the nervous system that can treat these chronic diseases. And we're doing that ourselves in cardiovascular disease first. Next slide, please. Cardiovascular disease is the least well served of the chronic diseases, while also being the largest by sort of spend. It makes it a $6 billion a year market, and sort of just the most attractive opportunity for this technology amongst a host of other diseases like diabetes, chronic inflammation, bladder control, otherwise. And if we move on. So at BIOS, we're run by, as Matt introduced, Emil and myself, as well as a team of medical device engineers, machine learning, platform people, and people that have scaled biotechs. Next slide, please. We're headquartered in Cambridge in the UK with a research office in Montreal in Canada, top companies in San Francisco. And then, so in summary, on the next slide, BIOS, we're using machine learning and neural interfaces to find and manipulate unique neural biomarkers about chronic diseases. And what this does is it means that you can define those therapeutics as software. Use software to define the electrical waveform that you apply to the nerve. And in doing so, you can have software-defined drugs for long-term chronic conditions.
Thank you, Oliver. That's super fascinating stuff. It opens the mind to all kinds of possibilities. Irina, do you have a question for Oliver?
I guess my question is more around the kind of go-to-market and this is a complex product with a lot of, it's a platform with a lot of potential applicabilities, potential angles, but each of them comes with a high cost of a clinical trial and regulatory and so on. So how do you think about that in correlation to the go-to-market, and how do you choose what's the right path to market there?
So yeah, thank you. It's a great question. As I sort of alluded to in there, we're building these first therapeutics in cardiovascular diseases because of kind of just some of the market forces and size of the opportunity. But at the same time, due to the sort of platform nature of the product and the technology, that means that the pharmaceutical partners that we're working with to look at other disease areas, also those are moving forward towards their own neural therapeutic products. And it means that we have a sort of de-risked strategy because other diseases can, like, you simultaneously improve the technology and get rid of technology risk by having multiple users. And it means you're sort of slightly isolated from the science risk of a single therapeutic, because you've got like different bits of science risk with different partners who have different expertise.
Are you planning to take the drugs to market yourself all the way? I know you're developing it, but is the plan to partner them beyond a certain stage, or is the plan to actually like develop it yourself, which is very different capital?
Yeah, we're not commercializing molecules that pharmaceutical partners look at with us. We're commercializing neural therapeutics, and some of those neural digital therapeutics are being developed with partners. Like a lot of pharmaceutical companies are now taking a position in the sort of bioelectronics industry, like GSK is the most obvious one. Merck is now in there. One of the Japanese pharma companies is as well. So we're co-developing with them neural therapeutics, so digital electrical medicines, as I described, but where they're using them for the drug discovery.
I get that. It's more around like what do you fund yourself, like, because there's different ways of doing it. You can actually do the trials required by until phase 1, and then you out license completely. You can co-develop them all the way to phase 3, and then you out license them for commercialization. And there's considerations on both sides, because if you want to keep doing them until like phase 3, then you can probably invest in less therapy area and less applications as the platform grows. So it makes you much more narrow in terms of like your choices, versus if you want to maybe develop them up to a certain stage. And that's what I mean with I mean,
right now we're we're sort of, our joint agreements are for collaborating all the way through the pipeline, and we're trying to work with very select partners in like very aligned target therapy areas rather than, you know, doing tens or hundreds right now. We're trying to, like, you know, do a select few that are in the most aligned areas and co-develop them all the way through.
Brilliant. Irina, thank you for your super insightful questions. It's good to really get inside there and work out what's going on, how it's going to work. Oliver, thank you so much for your time and presentation.
Thanks, Matt.
Now, the third startup pitching us today is See the Signs, and their CEO and co-founder is Dr. Bakshi. B has over 10 years of experience in healthcare, working as a GP within the NHS, and See the Signs is a platform that uses artificial intelligence mapped with the latest evidence to identify patients at risk of cancer at the earliest and most survivable stages of the disease. It covers the entire spectrum of cancer, and See the Signs wants to identify which cancer patients are most at risk and what tests, investigations or referrals they need, and work all that out in less than 30 seconds. B, welcome.
Thank you so much.
Brilliant.
Lovely to be here.
Absolutely. Well, we're thrilled to have you. So thank you so much. And without further ado, your 5 minutes starts now.
So 10 years ago, I was a junior doctor working on a night shift in the emergency department. And that night I met a patient named Joe. He came in seriously unwell, pale, in pain, and having lost a significant amount of weight. I organized some urgent investigations for him. And then hours later, I had the devastating task of diagnosing him with metastatic pancreatic cancer. During that heartbreaking exchange, at no point did Joe say, "Why did I get cancer?" But instead, "Why was my cancer diagnosed so late?" Joe had seen his doctor repeatedly over the last year, but his cancer was missed. 3 weeks later, Joe died, and his words stayed with me. Sadly, Joe's story is not unique. 1 in 2 people will be diagnosed with cancer at some point in their lives. Half of all patients are currently diagnosed in the late stages of the disease. And because of this, less than 20% will survive to 5 years. Yet diagnosing cancer is exceptionally difficult. There are over 200 different types of cancers, each with their own signs, symptoms, and risk factors, the earliest of which are often vague, non-specific, and overlap with other common health conditions. Unlike any other disease, cancer can present at any age, with any symptom, anywhere in the body. For the doctor, this can be challenging. On average, a doctor will diagnose only 8 new cancers per year and will see 1 rare case of cancer once in their lifetime. Yet early cancer detection is the single biggest prediction of survival, with over 80% of patients surviving 10 years or more if diagnosed early. It is also at least 50% cheaper to treat. Yet globally, it remains the second leading cause of death, with an annual spend of $1 trillion per year, majority of which is on late-stage treatment. At See the Signs, we are reimagining a future where every patient survives cancer. Building the world's largest structured database of cancer presentations, our patent-pending, evidence-driven machine learning engine can predict which patients will get cancer, the type of cancer, and when and how they should be investigated, ensuring cancer is detected at the earliest and most curable stage of the disease. Using digital phenotypes, we are creating personalized risk profiles for all patients, enabling accurate risk stratification of patients prior to them developing any symptoms. Alongside this, our model will be able to identify new factors that can contribute or safeguard against a cancer diagnosis. Covering the entire spectrum of cancer, our B2B platform is currently being used by doctors to identify and fast-track patients at risk of cancer. The platform is currently supporting over 10 million patients and has been commissioned by over 20% of the UK National Health Service and is scaling rapidly. Independent evaluation to date has demonstrated a statistically significant impact on early cancer detection rates, with See the Signs delivering a 30 times improvement in only 12 months. Emerging data has also seen a reduction in the inequality seen in cancer, improving identification of patients with disabilities from deprived backgrounds and minority ethnic groups. See the Signs has now also been recommended in national policy papers by NHS England and NHS Improvement to improve early cancer detection rates. The pandemic has also had a catastrophic impact on cancer, with an 85% drop in referral rates and hundreds of thousands of new cancer diagnoses being missed. During the pandemic, See the Science has supported remote risk assessment and referral of patients at risk of cancer from the comfort of their own home. We have remotely deployed See the Science to over 1,000 practices to support with this. Later this year, we will be launching our B2C platform, See My Science, using our prediction model. For the first time ever, patients will be able to digitally screen themselves or a loved one for cancer to accelerate identification of those who are at risk of cancer and access to diagnostics and treatment. See the Science is a purpose-driven organization founded by doctors with a single mission to reimagine a future in which everyone survives cancer. And early detection has the potential to save more lives than any cancer treatment in history. I couldn't save Joe, but See the Science could have. Thank you.
Thank you, Bea. That's a really powerful presentation. So thank you for sharing that. I'm interested about what you said about digital phenotypes. I have two kind of questions around that. One, I'm interested in the data sources that you're kind of looking at and you use to make these decisions. And secondly, how do you get around data gaps? You know, maybe it comes from, you know, personal data that perhaps doctors don't have access to. And how do you smooth over some of those gaps? Because you're not going to be able to capture the same data for every single person.
Yeah, absolutely. So our B2B platform is actually integrated with the leading electronic health records within the NHS, covering about 98% of the population. So actually, it's a very rich data source from kind of cradle to grave, a longitudinal data set. And because we act as data processors and because of the product that we're delivering, we're able to actually use all the data, both for patients who've diagnosed with cancer, but also those patients who haven't had a cancer diagnosis, looking at ethnography, postcode, geography, as well as demographic data, lifestyle data, to be able to triangulate those data sets. We are also using open sourced, validated evidence data sets and academic data set to triangulate how we validate each of the symptoms that we essentially attribute a risk threshold to a tumor type. So there is a lot of kind of engineering behind that, but essentially to increase the validity of how we look at prediction.
Brilliant. Thanks, Bea. Hélène, would you like to ask a question?
Yeah, that's super interesting. Thank you. So NHS focused at the moment, obviously, and got some great numbers of people involved. What's your go-to-market plan in terms of expanding outside of the UK?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the key things we've been looking at is because of the value of essentially the product can deliver in terms of cost savings, we've had a lot of interest from insurance sector, essentially saying that cancer is hugely expensive, and obviously late stage treatment is almost 50 times more expensive in many cases, especially with regards to really expensive chemo. In the UK, they cap that obviously because, you know, it's based on cost effectiveness, but in other markets, especially in the US market, you can end up having very, very expensive like immunotherapy treatment or trial therapy treatments. So by being able to detect patients earlier, actually majority, almost 70% of patients just need surgery as their first point of treatment. So we can significantly reduce the cost of treatment, but also the patient outcomes in doing so. So that's the type of go-to-market strategy we're looking at insurance providers, as well as looking at outcome-based healthcare as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Bea, for your time. Next up, we've got Mohamed Taha, who is the founder and CEO of Mojo Fertility, a company that uses artificial intelligence and robotics to drive the future of fertility care. With male fertility dropping up to 60% since the 1970s, and an increasing number of couples and individuals delaying time to having their first child, Mojo is tackling the decline in reproductive health. Before Mojo, Mohamed was a researcher at École Centrale de Lyon, working on designing new nanomaterials to produce infrared light for building affordable biosensors. Mohamed, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the nice introduction here.
Well, it's a pleasure. Mohamed, it's over to you. Your 5 minutes starts now.
Thank you. So as someone working in the fertility industry, I hear many dramatic stories about people who want to have a baby and really trust science to help them, especially when they opt for IVF treatments. The couples undergoing IVF are often ensured that this is a simple and safe routine treatment. Well, the reality is quite different. During IVF, women are given a cocktail of hormones that will increase eggs output to up to 10 or even more if doctors skew treatment. This is not a trivial prescription. These are powerful hormones with a range of severe side effects. We are speaking about cancer, depression, and heart problems. What's infuriating about this situation is that most couples are not told that IVF success rate is about 25%. They are also not told that male fertility factor is about 50% of the cases. And in 90% of cases that do go through IVF, the male fertility factor is never properly diagnosed or even treated. During my fertility journey and speaking to doctors in the UK, Spain, and even Switzerland, the consensus was that I, as a man, should not really care about my fertility. Worst case scenario, they just need to pick a sperm from my sample, and just one sperm, and my future partner would go through IVF. In other words, they were saying, my future partner will take the treatment from me. I think this is really evident on how damaging this perspective is. One of our collaborators in London School of Economics told me a horrifying story about a couple that underwent 4 cycles in 1 year without success. Shortly after, the woman unfortunately died from the medication. Later, it was actually found out that the man's sperm was compromised. Even IVF requires 1 sperm to work. Sometimes, as advertised, the man's sperm was never viable. And this is a reality of most fertility treatment these days. There are almost no regulations, no quality control, and every clinic follows a different protocol. The male fertility assessment is done manually using a microscope and a calculator and a finger in the air. And it's a very low tech, and the results are incredibly flawed or inaccurate. Every year, there are about 15 million data sets are lost just because it's manual. So we decided to change that at Mojo. We are using deep learning, robotics, and design to give hope to millions of couples worldwide who want to have a healthy baby. Slide number 2, please. And this is the product we created. We call it Mojo ISA. It's an intelligent microscope that automatically scans the sample. Slide number 2, please. Automatically scans the sample, ensuring we have enough and sufficient data to conduct a sperm count and detect the sperm, how it moves, and its shape. Slide number 4, please. And that's how exactly it works. So far, we have conducted over 3 clinical trials to date with Imperial College of London, Karolinska Institute, and King's Fertility, part of King's College London. And we displayed about 97% agreement with the gold standard protocol, which is the WHO method. Nonetheless, while the gold standard requires 2 humans to operate a sample and each take up to 45 minutes in best case scenario, we can do the same in under 10 minutes and with somebody without any prior knowledge or experience in biology. We have launched our product in January 21. So far, we have customers spanning Europe, in Spain, UK, Germany, and they are really thrilled to offer their patient great fertility care. And they started to look at the male fertility factor way more than before. At Mojo, this is what we can really make a huge difference in the space. We can ensure that if women have to go through IVF, they are doing it with a strong chance of success and strong conviction. And if the couple I mentioned earlier have used Mojo, perhaps not only would have helped to make a new life, but also would have saved one. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mohamed, for your presentation. Irina, did you want to go ahead with the first question?
Yes, so the question I had was around, well, I guess 2, what else, what is the burden of proof on the product and on the science for this to be adopted and for both kind of doctors and patients to kind of recognize that, to trust it. And then the second one, I think you hinted a little bit around how you go to market and how you, what does it take to commercialize that, the hoops that get you there, and your approach and plan.
The first question about the burden is around awareness and at the same time cost effectiveness. Awareness in terms of male fertility usually overlooked in clinics, and men themselves don't really look at their fertility until it's very late. So that's something that we are working with clinics on from the very beginning. They need, if they buy Mojo, they have the knowledge of a proper andrologist, somebody specialized in looking at male fertility at their fingertips. So that's the first one. Also, it saved them lots of money when it's placed in clinics. So that's the other hand when it's kind of like drive the adoption. In terms of our go-to-market plan, we started deploying the product in January, and we are launching during the first year ourselves in our key clinics that worked really with us over the years to develop the products in Europe. And then we are looking forward to scaling sales through partnering with distributors.
Hélène, did you have a question?
Yeah, so just to clarify, did you say, so obviously traditional IVF is very lucrative and lots of clinics are doing it. Were you alluding to the fact that the clinics are responding well to this technology and are embracing it, or are you meeting some sort of resistance?
Depends on the clinics, but so far with the clinics that develop the products with us, we are not meeting really big resistance from there. It's more about, it's not resistance, more about awareness and understanding the value of looking at the male factor. It's specifically right now with the awareness is really rising on the male fertility, especially the new book that has just came out with Professor Shanna. It's about countdown, and the clinics actually started to look at the male fertility factors. We also, women became more aware that fertility is 50-50. So when they start to now go to clinics, they ask like, can I get my partner also diagnosed and have the full workup happen as me? So we see, yeah, the space is moving compared to when we started in 2017, but we need just to push this further, like the envelope around awareness, the science back our product, and hopefully we can get things moving.
Okay, great, thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Mohamed. We're really delivering on the variety here. We've had male fertility, we've had clinical trials, a whole bunch of stuff, and we're heading in a new direction now. With our fifth person pitching us today is Hélène, Guillaume, who is the founder and CEO of WILD.AI. It's an app that helps women train, fuel, and recover based on their menstrual cycle. The team includes people as the female health legend, Dr. Stacey Sims, Mike Levine, the co-founder of Clue, so a pretty star-studded lineup. Their app is now live, and they've started onboarding coaches and are starting discussions to distribute their knowledge to products and devices with their API. Hélène, welcome.
Thank you. Hi, virtual worlds. Very excited to be here. You can go to the next slide. So WILD.AI is changing the face of, not the one before, changing the face of health to include women in it. So next slide, this is me. So I grew up, I'm a data scientist as training, but I grew up loving sports and outdoors and tracking everything. But I've been basically eating and training like a man. And I have the biggest news today to tell you, next slide, which is women are not men. And so I was thinking, growing up, if I'm eating, training like a man, but my body is actually quite different, why is that? And next slide. So realize that possibly the reason is that if I have that body and what I was hearing, and I'm moody and bitchy and it's so complicated, is that my female physiology is not a feature, it's not a bug, but a feature. And that's really what we realized at WILD.AI. Next slide. So women, as women, as we go through our puberty, so at 13, 14, and we have the second period, you go to school and you're bleeding and it hurts, but you are told like the other kids to run around the school. And what you hear is to ignore all the symptoms. But we go through these big life stages, taking a pill, another pill, post-pregnancy, 10 years of perimenopause, menopause, and for 40 years, next slide, we have menstrual cycles that heavily impact our daily life. So when we have our periods, we might need iron. When we ovulate, we need fats. After ovulation, we need to time our protein intake. and all of our metrics, all of our behaviors are changing all the time. So how can we understand that? So what we've done at WILD.AI is extensive research on what is a woman, and translated that research into our app, which is helping who are active women train, eat, and recover based on the menstrual cycle. Next slide. So this is your app. So you're logging in every morning and you have your readiness, understanding your metrics as a woman, how everything is moving in your body, and we're tracking data from your wearables and manual input. And you receive as well, next slide, recommendations on how to train, and next slide, what to eat, supplements that you need to take to mitigate negative symptoms and really take advantage of the positive sides. And so now our app is live. So we've been like in testing in the backgrounds for months, but now it's live and it's testing really well. Next slide. So we started with women who are active from the pros, so they really love it. This is Anne, she says like, it literally changed my life. I wish I had it earlier. And that's really what we get as a feeling from women. They finally feel heard, but we are going from the top of the funnel, so like professional athletes, but also down to anyone of you who is like training indoors on a Peloton or like running outside. So it really appeals to this vast majority, like population of women, and is really loved. So next slide. For like the past 6 months, we have consistently like over 40% monthly active users, over 25% weekly active users. And yes, we have a tech product, but also what we have is this huge empowering messaging, which is like women are not, a bug. It's not, it's really how can you understand your body, embrace your body, and take the most out of it. And that is why, next slide, we covered from magazines like from Forbes, for instance, and have like this big messaging reach. And behind, next slide, so my background, data scientist and sports, but we also have Mike, who was the co-founder of Clue, the company that invented the word femtech, Dr. Stacey Sims, who is like the world reference in female physiology in sports, and the rest of the team is PhDs, researchers, and we really created this product that is now really solid, and we're ready to scale. So next for us is, now it's in the markets and it's getting it to the masses. So like really spreading the word out from like using the app, and also like really on the messaging. How can we get women and men understand that this body that is capable of creating a human, which like the deepest, best technologies can't yet, is incredible, and really embrace that. So that is us. Next slide. WILD.AI, accelerating female performance. Yes, from the top, because it's easier to go from the top of the catwalk to the masses than the other way around. Like you would wear a Ferrari cap, but probably not a Citroen one. And very excited to speak to all of you. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. And I'm glad I didn't wear my Citroen cap today. That would have been embarrassing.
People, sorry, yeah.
I wanted to ask about the pricing structure in particular. It sounds like quite a premium specific product, but obviously as you widen up the market, you've got whatever, Nike, you've got Garmin, Strava, lots of big, very popular freemium models there. Can you talk a little bit about how your pricing structure will take that on? Yeah,
so basically like the app is a B2C traditional app. We are pre-revenues, but we'll get revenues. But what's really interesting is like all these trackers, Whoop, Oura, Garmin, you name it, all the apps, they are actually, so if you use the words technology, like if you use the word sports, female sports, health, female health, and technology, female technology, it means that by opposition, the technology we're using is actually men technology, men tech, and we are creating femtech. So what we are creating, the underlying knowledge is fueling our app. And the app is the first client of it. But then down the line, what we want is to have this technology served as an API to all these product services devices. And that is why it's really exciting. So talking to people like, all the wearables, apps, like you'll see Mohamed afterwards. And so that will be like really the big piece. So starting with the B2C part, but then down the line is really like our objective is to reach 1 billion women by 2030 through the API model. And that is where is like this massive reach, and also like really changing the face of technology. Like women are today using men technology, not female technology. So yeah, basically turning men tech into tech through our API. Yeah.
Brilliant. Irina, did you have a question?
I guess my question is, how do you, scale this and beyond the, early well, not early adopters, but more like there's a category of people that are obsessed about their health and performance, and that's quite small, right? How do you make this more of a mass product than a, worried well or quantified self, or however you want to call that population?
Yeah, so like we started with women who are more active. So typically they would have wearables, but they can have a Fitbit, they can have an Apple Watch as well. So that is quite broad to start with. But also down the line, like if you say things like, when you have your periods, you need iron, like it does make sense, and it does make sense for anyone. Before your periods, you might be bloated, you need increased hydration, electrolytes, and immerse your body in cold water. And we're not talking about the top like professional athletes, like basically all women resonate with that, or your digestion is changing and you have diarrhea or constipation, and you never need to have that ever again if you are taking the right supplements at the right time, magnesium, zinc. So it's basically like how to time very well your intake in terms of nutrition, supplements, training, but that really appeals to the masses. So like we've tested that, and so now we are still building the algorithm behind. So it's like interesting for us to work with women who are more engaged, possibly have data as well, more data, but then like basically it's available for everyone. That is the app itself. But also if you imagine today a woman has on her phone a sleep app, a diet app, and a sports app, the diet recommendations today are actually not tuned based on her menstrual cycle or based on her symptoms if she doesn't menstruate because she's in perimenopause and menopause. So like these apps can be fueled through our API. So that's how we could reach really this massive mass of population like that.
Brilliant. Thank you, Hélène, for your presentation. Now we're on to our sixth and final startup pitching us today, and that startup is Humanity, an app that monitors your rate of aging. Joining us from Humanity are the co-founders, Michael Geer and Pete Ward, and their mission is to extend the lifespan and health span of humanity by creating the world's largest human adaptive trial. Their consumer subscription service enables users to find out what actions they can take to slow their aging process and thus reduce their risk of disease by tracking key aging biomarkers and then using machine learning to recommend personalized actions. Michael and Pete, welcome.
Thanks so much. It's great to be here. So everyone, this is our presentation. My name is Pete Ward, as you heard, and Mike Geer is my co-founder, and this is Humanity. So what is Humanity? Well, Humanity is a consumer platform that will help you as a user and all of us understand exactly what actions are working to slow or even reverse our aging. We're both consumer tech entrepreneurs who founded, scaled, and exited businesses that have reached over 1 billion users, including the likes of Wayne, Badu, and Anchor.
So at the height, unfortunately, of all that kind of consumer tech success that Pete and I had, we encountered people in our families. Pete, his dad had a stroke, and me had people that got late stage cancer. We had these tragic health events that led us to basically start going and seeing if we could apply our skills to preventive health. We were lucky as we went on that journey to encounter a ton of scientists, the top scientists in the world that were on that same mission, including George Chorch and Kristen Fortney. And we were lucky to have one of our kind of science crushes join us as the Chief Science Officer, Peter Joshi.
And our mission is simple. We want to extend the health span of all humanity. And when we say health span, it's not the same as lifespan. What we're actually focused on is not extending the sick state, but actually helping us slow down the aging process so that we can live a healthier life for longer.
And the problem with that is, and what we get from health advice today, and Hélène and others have touched on this, is different actions work differently for different people and at different times. And so the only way to do this right is you need to be constantly monitoring your rate of aging, which we're able to do, and see how those lifestyle actions together start to affect that in a positive or negative direction.
So we're in closed beta right now. And essentially the way it works is it pulls in your actions from your heart rate sensors, from your smartphone, and then it can essentially understand, how you've been doing compared to everybody else. We extrapolate that against your biological age and rate of aging, which is based on real-world health outcomes. We also have a blood and saliva kit that we've been testing on our alpha users and had some amazing feedback from that too. And also the beta users who we've been working to get feedback from have volunteered a huge amount of positivity, whether it be an influencer like Eden Sassoon, who said she was honored and humbled just to be on the program. Apple telling us it's the best UX they've seen in a long time. People obviously getting very excited about the fact that this could literally extend their life, and providing them with that instant feedback and reward and concrete feedback loop aligned with their intentions. And our favorite perhaps is from none other than Jay Metcalf, who said, suddenly I'm thinking about what I'm doing in terms of my aging as opposed to fitness. And that's totally rewiring the brain.
So one of our biggest values is open collaboration. You heard from Hélène with WILD.AI, and we have our other partners. Amdena has volunteering 55 machine learning people to work on our data. And it sounds like I should probably reach out to B right after this, because I love See Your Signs. And so we're moving forward mission aligned, and we're actually going to create more impact together.
And our early metrics are strong. We've already got 50% daily active users out of monthlies. We've got more than 10,000 people on our waiting list and counting. Of those that come through the platform, we're already getting 42% that invite others. And we're getting a good 50% retention after 11 weeks of use. And of those that we did offer the option to upgrade for the blood and DNA methylation, over 2/3 of them actually opted to take that choice. So thank you very much. This is Humanity.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mike and Pete. Just ending on that little note of extending the health span of all humans. Just a small one there. Hélène, did you have a question for Mike and Pete?
So I was going to ask about what your kind of go-to-market strategy was, but if you've got 10,000 people on your waiting list, I'm thinking it's probably looking quite strong at the moment. But do you have like a plan of how you're going to push it out? Is it word of mouth? Is it kind of corporate? How are you going to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So Mike and myself have got a great level of experience of scaling consumer tech platforms. So we understand how to build those engines for growth. And in our early testing, we saw as high as 50% of those who were invited into the program would invite their friends. So we could see that this was something that people felt was not only valuable for themselves, but valuable for anybody else. And I think if you think about it from a practical market perspective, we all age. We all understand that it's something that we would ideally like to slow down and live a healthier life for longer. And so the network effect potential is really there. And we've seen that. So we're building a number of mechanics that will amplify that ability. And I think that, that's just the start. I think there is, of course, once we get the scale, the opportunity to collaborate openly with other institutions and platforms so that we can even become a B2B2C platform, support potential insurance partners and so on. But for the beginning, it's very much building that demand pool from our users.
The question I had is obviously, if the app works, this is potentially very long lifespans we're talking, very users should be retaining for a really long time. My question is, how do you stop those users thinking, I'm fitter, I've got that knowledge, great, I don't need to subscribe anymore, I can move on. How do you retain someone for years or decades if that's what you're aiming for?
It's a great question. And so if you think about the rate of aging as a sort of lead measure to your lag of, how old am I actually biologically, it gives you this concrete feedback loop where you can understand whether the actions I'm taking right now or over the last week or even of the last month having a positive and negative effect on my actual core health and aging. So, this is something that sticks with you throughout your life. It's not like a diet where you test your glucose and maybe you do that for a couple of weeks to get an insight and then you stop, or you track your food for 90 days. This is something that can be your companion. And of course, the more we use it, the more the people actually give feedback of what actions they're taking, the more predictive, like a Waze for health, this can be.
Brilliant. Well, thank you both for your time and for your answers. That brings us. Thank you. That brings us to the end of our presentations. This has been an incredibly interesting, slightly mind-boggling presentation from 6 fantastic startups on how they're all innovating in the health industry. That's all we've got time for today. Now, Hélène, Irina, and I need to go and make the tricky decision to decide on how of these 6 startups, who will win the opportunity to present at Wired Health next week. And indeed, the winner will be announced at that Wired Health virtual conference next week on March 31st. And if you didn't know already, Wired Health is a free episode broadcast which explores the powerful shift in the future of health, offering an overview of the accelerating trends and examining the ripple effect caused by COVID-19 on supply chains, maternal health, and drug discovery, and a whole bunch of other things. There's a really exciting and quite prestigious speaker faculty, including the prominent geneticist George Church, Benevolent AI CEO Joanna Shields, and the CEO of COVID-19 vaccine developer BioNTech, Shahin. And you can find out more about the event online at wired.uk/health-event, where tickets start at £60. Thank you to EY for sponsoring this session, and thank you to the judges for your time today, and of course to our startups, Ancora, BIOS, See the Signs, Mojo Fertility, WILD.AI, and Humanity for sharing your journeys. And most importantly, a final thank you to everyone watching this session. If you enjoyed today, please do have a look at more of Wired's virtual briefings on health, business, technology, politics and science at wired.co.uk. And in the meantime, stay well, and we will see you soon.